Hey guys, how you all feeling tonight? Welcome to another epic episode of Falcor's Fantastic Adventures. I got a couple of stories for you today. Just some things that happen when you're getting treatment. No big deal. Because even though you're bored in your room 24/7, you've got literally nothing to do but watch Netflix and YouTube the whole day. There's no shortcoming of problems that come up from time to time. I mean, it's not going to be smooth sailing. Somehow, the universe finds a way to add a little bit of spice to your stay. So these are some things that happened while I was, let's just call it the first stage of this entire thing. The way I see it is I divide it into maybe 3 stages. It's, you spend some time in the hospital, then they let you go when you're feeling relatively okay, and then you have to go back to the hospital, so that's second stage, and then you can go home again, and then third stage, maybe fourth stage comes up. I think I had with this definition of stages, I had maybe 4 or 5. I still gotta confirm that. But let's say in first stage, already coming out of the box, I had something happened. I was there laying in my bed, minding my own business, and this doctor comes in, and I can immediately tell that this guy is a total rookie, because he was practically shaking, and he looks at me and just stares at me, and I'm like, what is it? And the guy just looks at me, and I'm like, obviously this guy's never seen a cancer patient before. He's probably a newbie. So I'm like, God damn it, what is it? And he's like, okay, so Mr. Farkas, well, I have some bad news. And I'm like, oh, man, what is it? And he's like, well, for one reason or another, no one's to blame for this. I'm just going to tell you straight. You've caught this bacteria called KPC, I guess. It's KPC in Spanish. And I'm like, what do you mean I caught this bacteria? And they're like, yeah, you know that swab test you do every Wednesday? Well, that test is made specifically to check if you've got a very specific bacteria in your gut called KPC. And I'm like, and what does this bacteria do? And he's like, oh, it's no big deal. No big deal at all. It's just very, very contagious. And if you get a fever and we need to use antibiotics, we only get one chance to sort of stop this bacteria from infecting you and then possibly killing you. No big deal. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And he's like, yeah. The problem is, so, hopefully you're not going to get sick, so it's not such a big deal. But the big problem is that it's extremely contagious. And there I noticed that he had extra protection on. He practically, his whole body was covered in almost a hazmat suit. And I'm like, well, why is this a problem? And he's like, because it's so contagious that we have to move you to another room. What's called an isolation area in the hospital. And I'm like, God damn it, I love the room that they gave me. The bed was perfect. There was a window, the table worked and it rolled correctly. And I didn't want to change rooms. I was super cozy. And he's like, I know you like this room. You've repeated this several times, but we're going to have to move you. So they did immediately. They immediately moved me. I didn't even have to wait. Usually you have to wait. And, this boss, by the way, is super difficult to kill. But anyway, what happened? So we continued doing this. They moved me away, and I'm like, okay, the room is pretty good. They give me so the isolation room was actually one of the VIP rooms because they had no other room to give me. The whole hospital was full except for the VIP room in the isolation area. So I got pretty lucky, except that I asked the doctor, I'm like, how did I catch this disease? And the guy's like, well, sorry to say this, but it's actually an intra-hospital bacteria you can't get this outside of the hospital. So I'm afraid we kind of dropped we dropped the ball for this one. I'm truly sorry. And I'm like, what if I get sick? And the doctor's like, yeah, well, we're just gonna have to use that silver bullet. And I'm like, well, this sort of puts me into a difficult position, because sure enough, I did get sick with a 39-degree fever. I was shaking like a rickets patient, and it was just terrible. And I'm going to tell you what happened when I got sick. Because I was isolated and in this new room, they had to change all the nurses and the doctors that were responsible for me, because I was moved to another floor. And this VIP sector or whatever had the worst doctors I've ever seen in my life. Like, I was used to pros, and I got peanuts. Okay, like, these people were completely useless. And the reason I got infected was because the nurses couldn't properly they couldn't place the line. So, you know, I had a main line, and they also like injected certain things in my veins in my arms. But, you know, those lines, those lateral or peripheral lines, I think they're called, need to be changed every 3 days. So they would put the lines, and then 3 days later they had to replace them, and they sucked at placing them. So, you know, the vein would get infected, and yeah, once it got infected, I got a fever, 39-degree fever, and sure enough, the doctors came and were like, damn, like, we're gonna have to first of all make tests on you again, where we're gonna have to take blood from you, from every part of your body, and god damn it, it's just so annoying to think about this, but even just taking the blood out was a whole ordeal, because the doctor was like completely useless at it. He couldn't take blood from my veins. Took 3 hours. They were like, the doctors out of nowhere were like, you know, we're gonna need a more accurate reading of your temperature, so we're gonna have to put this thermometer here right into your anus. I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, you've got 39 something, but we're gonna need a more accurate reading, so we're just gonna put this tiny little thermometer into your anus. I'm like, you're not putting that in my ass, come on. And yeah, and the other doctors even agreed, that's ridiculous. But this is the level of retardation I'm talking about. You know, like, they moved me to a room where the doctors were like, yeah, the priority is putting this thing in your butt. So yeah, it took 3 hours to take the blood samples. One of the nurses came over and helped. She sort of saved the day. And yeah, sure enough, because of the infection, I had to take that silver bullet thing. And thank God it worked, because if the infection progressed, that bacteria would have taken over and might have killed me. So again, dodged a bullet thanks to that silver bullet. This is what I'm talking about. Like, the tiniest thing could have killed me. Remember, by now I did so much chemo that there was that my immune system was gone, because you know, chemo attacks your white and red and platelet cells. So, you know, they pretty much killed everything. I didn't have any of those. The red blood cells were replaced all the time with blood transfusions, and the platelets too were also replaced. So yeah, eventually I got better, and then something else happened. The doctor, another doctor came in. I never saw the rookie ever again, but another doctor came in, and you know, started asking me how I've been doing with my craps. And I'm like, well, I mean, it's been going well. And they're like, because there's a serious danger now that you might get constipated real bad. And I'm like, I don't really feel constipated. In fact, I feel like it's the other way around. Like, it's getting, you know, kind of softy. And this is gross, I know, but it leads to a story. In fact, I told her, like, I'm starting to feel a sharp pain in my gut. And they're like, what do you mean a sharp pain in your gut? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know if this is normal, but like I'm feeling serious, like it's starting to feel like pressure in my gut. And they're like, okay, we're gonna wait and see how it progresses. I'm like, fair enough, that seems logical. But every day it got worse to a point where even sitting upright sort of hurt, laughing hurt a lot. My friends would come over and make me laugh, and I would be like, God damn it, stop, because it's gonna kill me. And eventually they were like, this is probably appendicitis. And I'm like, oh, come on, no, it's not. They're like, yes, this is appendicitis. And they brought in a specialist, some kind of appendicitis maniac. And they were like, yes, well, I don't think it's appendicitis. So there was a whole conflict among the doctors. And I'm like, that's it, I'm gonna die, because these people don't know what it is. And then they're like, you know what, there's only one way to find out. You're gonna have to give us a sample of your poo. And I had to do it. I had to take a sample of my poo in a little flask. And I gave it to them. And they're like, they look at it and they're like, this isn't normal. And I'm like, no, it's not. This doesn't look normal, doesn't feel normal, I don't like it. And it took them 3 days, and I was in pain. It took them 3 days to diagnose it, and by then I was like freaking out. I'm like, please, just can you give me an update as soon as possible? And then at 4 a.m., 3 days later, 4 a.m., one of the doctors rushes in, like really quickly, barely putting on her protective gear. And she's like, we found it, we know what it is. And I'm like, what is it? And they're like, Clostridium difficile. And I'm like, what is that? It sounds difficult. And they're like, it is. It's a very, very, very infectious and extremely aggressive kind of bacteria that only appears when you use a lot of antibiotics. And sure enough, it was because of the whole KPC treatment, that silver bullet that we used. It was so powerful that basically it killed all the bacteria in my gut. All of it, the good and the bad. But the thing about Clostridium, which by the way, Americans and I think most English-speaking countries, they call it C-sec. C-sec was it? No, C-sec, no. C. diff, sorry. It's called C. diff, Clostridium difficile. And what happens is, like 5% of the population catch it, and it's very infectious, and it's extremely resistant to antibiotics. In fact, I believe there's only 1 or 2 antibiotics that can actually kill it, or at least contain it, or like put it into a dormant state. And I had to take one of those orally. It's very expensive too. It's a very expensive drug. And this thing, what it does is it sort of grows in the lower parts of your large intestine, and it grows in there, and no other bacteria is there to stop it. So, of course, you know, it just proliferates and explodes. And you know, if you don't do anything about it, it'll kill you. So luckily, we had the drugs to stop it, and for like maybe a month more, I had to deal with that and take in this very, very disgusting tasting drug orally, because there's no, you can inject the drug, but that doesn't work for Clostridium. Again, you know, I still got lucky, but you know, one thing can lead to another. You know, like I remember thinking, all of this happening so quickly, one thing after another, it can be pretty demoralizing, but I don't know. Those are things that happen when you're in there, you know, in the hospital. I remember like the thing with putting the lateral tubes, needles into you, is that, you know, if you don't have someone who's pretty pro at it, what can happen is something called phlebitis, which is what happened to me, which is that either they miss the vein and they think that they're in, but actually they're not. So, for example, they put the needle in, it reaches the vein, it hits the vein, it kind of absorbs some blood, so the nurse thinks that she's in, but she actually perforated the vein, both walls, and is now basically stabbed into muscle or something. And this is very common when you have nurses that aren't good. That's what happened with me very, very often in that room. And what happens is, first of all, they don't believe you. You tell them it's not in. Like, you can sort of, by then you feel it. They take blood out of you so much that you know when it's in and when it's not. And they don't believe you because, they're like that. Some nurses they're just very impatient with their patients. And they don't believe you, so you already feel like you're not being taken seriously. And then when they do start believing you, they try to fix it. They still can't fix it, and what they do is, to make sure that to prove to you that the vein that the needle was working, what they do is they inject a sort of just a liquid solution into you, which is basically nothing. Imagine just water with some kind of salts. And it doesn't do anything, but it's a way of checking if there's conductivity, if there's liquids going in. And at first the liquids seem to go in, but then you realize that actually it's going in outside of the vein. It's going into your muscles or between the tissue. And what happens is, like an egg-sized bulb starts growing on wherever they're trying to inject you. Like in my case, it was the elbows and the forearm, and I'd be like, it's pretty shocking when you see a liquid ball forming under your skin, and they're telling you, no, that's nothing, that's just your muscle. And I'm like, I'm not retarded, okay? I've seen my forearm, I've known my forearm all my life. You can't tell me this is real. And then, I would panic because, no one's taking me seriously. It's starting to really hurt. There's a thing growing inside me. It looks like an alien's egg. And my girlfriend was there, and she's like, getting angry at the nurses. And of course I'm getting angry and I'm losing it. And luckily, this ties into how you become a kid and an old man and an adult at the same time when you do this. I was almost crying out of anger, and the nurse sort of abandoned me. She just left me there with that bulb. She just pulled the needle out, and I think she just gave up and was just like, screw it, I'm just gonna go. Someone else can take care of this later, which is what she did. And my girlfriend was there, and she tried to comfort me. She's like, I'm gonna go get someone, I'm not coming back until someone comes fix this. And before that, she was like, until then, here. And she pulls out this pack of Band-Aids, but not any kind of Band-Aids. They were the Star Wars themed ones. And my mom was there too. She's just laying back, I'll just let his girlfriend take care of this. She seems to have it under control. She was just looking in shock at how I completely relaxed. All I needed was to be distracted with something Star Warsy or something. And my girlfriend's like, which one do you want? And I'm like, I want to use two. Because I had two kind of scars there. Two injuries from the needles. And I'm like, I want two. And she's like, okay, you can have two. But which ones do you want? And I'm looking at them, there's a C-3PO one and a R2-D2 one and Millennium Falcon, lightsabers. And I'm like, I want the lightsaber one and I want the Millennium Falcon one. And she's like, but the Millennium Falcon one is a big one, use one of the small ones. And I'm like, God damn it, I want Millennium Falcon. But she's a genius. She only said that to distract me even more, genius. Just another reason, and I'm like, okay, this is good. And she helped me put it on because I couldn't, not with one hand. And sure enough, I felt amazing afterwards. All my pain was gone. And that's just another example of how you're a little baby when you're there. Eventually another nurse came, the only nurse in that sector that I've ever loved. She was really a lifesaver. I don't remember her name though, but she was such a lifesaver. So she came in and she's like, "Let me take care of this," and she put in a lateral what's it called? Lateral needle thing in my arm that lasted a month, which is unheard of. Like maximum people would leave it for 15 days, I think. And that's a lot. That's already breaking the rules by far. But we left it in for a month because that thing was working with all cylinders perfectly. And so like for all the pain I went through and all the infection, at least I got a good lateral line in. So yeah, that's another kind of horror story thing that happened. It's not so intense though. Luckily after that, soon after that, the Clostridium was gone after like a month. The KPC was gone too, so I don't have any of those anymore, luckily. Even though they can be pretty hard to lose. Like some people live with that stuff, and I've heard of cases where the only solution is getting a fecal transplant, which I don't know if you people knew about this. That exists. Like you literally get someone else's crap and you put it into your digestive system, and usually it's some kind of amazing miracle crap that like comes from a really good digestive system with really good bacteria, because ultimately the only problem is an imbalance of bacteria. So with these new healthy bacteria, they sort of flush out the bad ones. Luckily I didn't have to do that, but that would have been an option if getting rid of these two bacteria was an absolute necessity. They would have probably done that to me. So I dodged another bullet there. But yeah, they told me about that too. They're like, "No, it's probably not going to happen, but I just need you to know that." Meanwhile, while all of this was happening, they were checking my parents and the world for a possible donor, and my dad is too old to donate, and my two brothers tried, but none of them were compatible. My brothers would have been ideal, honestly, because usually those are the most compatible. But my mom was, at first we didn't know, but she was 50% compatible, which is the maximum compatibility you can have as a mother or a father, due to genetics, basically. I'm not going to get into the details, but basically, you know how you inherit 50% of your genes from your mom and 50% from your dad. So there's no way you're going to be 100% compatible. But I was maximum compatibility with possible compatibility with my mom. So it's not ideal. They're like, we should be looking for something closer to 100, like between 90 and 100 would be perfect. But 50%, like it can be solved. Like at least there's a chance you might not die. So we're going to keep that in our pocket. But meanwhile, we're going to look for someone more compatible, because in the rest of the world. So the search was on, and nothing appeared, and the doctors were getting kind of nervous, and they were like, "Oh no, what's going to happen?" And we wouldn't get answers for months when it came to that. Months and months and months. The thing with this sort of treatment is, if for example you've got acute leukemia and you have to get a transplant, the truth is, if you don't find someone compatible, this is what's going to happen. There's only a limit to how much chemo you can give someone. I didn't know this, but you can't get chemo for the rest of your life. They're going to offer it to you. They're going to try to adapt. They're going to try to give you different chemo combinations and things like that. But eventually, if you don't get a transplant, you're going to you're gonna die. And so it's always sort of in the back of your head, like, come on, find someone, find someone, find someone. And luckily I had my mom. Like, I always knew if nothing else came up, I had my mom. But some people wait for, you know, a year, 2 years, and by then the, you know, the leukemia, you know, has come back up, and it's you already have another huge infection in your bone marrow, and some people lose hope, and it can be terrible. In fact, I'm not going to talk about this today, but the pandemic actually pretty much sentenced people to death when it came to anyone who needed a transplant. Because, not getting into details, but basically many countries, I'd say most countries, completely shut their borders into the importation of medical goods and organs and things like that. So if your donor was late or didn't donate on time, or even worse, sent the donation but it can't cross the border because, you know, the law, then you're screwed. You're absolutely screwed. And there's no way around it. You can't just tell the government, like, no, come on, make an exception. They're going to say no. And so you're going to end up waiting the whole pandemic for your donation. And goddamn, I was almost in that situation. But I'm not going to jump the gun with this, because it's a whole other story for another day. For now, I just want to talk about some stuff that happened while I was in there, in the clink. We'll still have like a few minutes. Oh, what's this? Blood letter. I prefer my thing. Hopefully we're going to find a place to save here. Oh, by the way, please leave a comment today saying with any questions you have, and I'm going to answer them next video. If I get enough questions, I'll make a Q&A, a frequently asked question thing. But if I don't get enough questions, I'm just going to answer them while talking about another topic. Today was a pretty chill day when it came, like, I didn't have much to talk about. Because after this I'm going to be talking about the transplant, and but before that I'm going to talk about some news that came up while I was, you know, recovering from all, not now, but like some stuff that happened right after they sent me home after the first stage. Basically second stage stuff that happened, but I'd say the transplant would be third and then fourth stage, but a few things had to happen before. And then, you know, I'm going to talk about the radiation treatment, which was the toughest part of this entire thing. Easily the toughest thing I've had to do. It was terrible. That was terrible. I think chemo is tolerable, it's not as bad. Radiation, at least the one I got a really tough radiation, was very, very hard on me. I suffered. But that's a whole other story again. That comes in stage 4. We don't have time to check that out. We're going to end the episode here. Pretty simple episode, not too intense, but it's part of the story. I felt like taking these tiny little stories out of the way. I didn't know where else to put them. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed them. Watch the rest of my videos if you're interested, and see you next time. Bye!